Hello my friends and welcome. I decided pretty early on to discontinue coverage of Elden Ring, leading up to the release. It was an attempt to preserve the excitement of discovery and to enhance exploring this new open-world Souls experience. However, I didn't plan on logging over 200 hours into the game before releasing any content whatsoever. I've decided to compile my thoughts on FromSoft's latest game, not really to give it a score, but more of a review of my experience with Elden Ring. Difficulty. I want to try to tackle difficulty first, just get it out of the way. Talking with other people about Elden Ring tends to revolve around how hard or easy the game is. While undeniably part of the experience, Elden Ring handles difficulty more like an open world game would, giving you ample means to enhance your character. Littering the lands between are caves, tunnels, catacombs, churches, ruins, forts, manors, and more, all filled with items and abilities that will in turn make your player stronger and more likely to succeed against whatever monstrosity you might stumble upon. Playing blind through Elden Ring, it sometimes felt a bit unbalanced. For example, early on I explored far to the east from the start and picked fights with enemies that allowed very little chance of success. So, I went somewhere else and continued my quest to the north, beyond Stormvale. Later I returned to the red zone to find I was killing bosses in 2 to 3 normal attacks. I doubt either of these scenarios is the intended difficulty. Without careful planning or dumb luck, a lot of boss fights could easily lean toward being overwhelming or underwhelming for the player. But fear not, the in-game content seems to be balanced fairly well for a player that has adventured the lands between, seeking challenges and claiming the treasures hidden all across the world. That is to say, from my experience, the late game bosses step it up a notch. However, by exploring and gaining strength, I never ran out of things to kill or places to go. There was never a need to grind for runes, because late game bosses bestow more than enough. With the amount of these bosses that are optional, I could see a complete playthrough getting the player to level 170 or beyond. I finished my first playthrough at level 150, and was overpowered for almost every situation. Obviously this is different for everybody, I'm just reporting my experience. So how does this stack up to Dark Souls? I would put Elden Ring content on par with bosses from Dark Souls 3. So you can expect a wide range of designs, all with varying difficulties, from gimmick fights like Yorm the Giant, to high energy rumbles with sword-wielding maniacs, with multiple phases. It's all here, and there's some really memorable fights, despite the sheer volume of bosses. That leads me right into bosses. I can't really write a review of a Souls game and leave out bosses, and there are some doozies. However, I'd like to start off addressing the reuse of generic bosses, and my thoughts on why it works here. While one could easily criticize FromSoft for injecting the same boss into multiple dungeons across the lands, there are a couple benefits to this design approach. First off, it gives you another chance to face off against bosses you previously felled, perhaps giving you a better chance at fighting it closer to a suitable level. Love it or hate it, I think reusing bosses makes these lesser bosses a bit more memorable. Shard bearers are another story. There are a few non-shard bearers I would include here too. Fights you can just tell a lot of time and attention went into. What people have dubbed their set-piece bosses, generally the mainline characters, Godric, Morgott, Renala, etc. These bosses exude an extreme level of polish that is quite easily picked up on. My problem with the lesser bosses is not being reused, but rather outclassed in every way to the more polished main bosses. Okay, let's talk about graphics. By now you've probably seen the game in action, so I won't get too bogged down on graphics. I've been playing on the PS5 version, and it's a step up from Dark Souls 3, graphically speaking. Actual art style and atmosphere included, I feel it's several steps above Dark Souls 3. I don't really want to compare it to other titles, because I think that's the closest comparison that can really be made regarding the graphics. These games aren't made with the intention to create the best looking game ever made. Graphical fidelity seems to take a side seat during production, being especially true for Elden Ring, considering how ambitious an endeavor its creation was for From Software. Not to say Elden Ring doesn't look amazing, it does. In fact, here's some footage of my favorite locales. If you don't want to be spoiled here, please avert your eyes momentarily while I roll these clips. Let's talk about something new that's not carried over from Dark Souls: the map. You will find that the map is an integral tool in exploring the vast world in Elden Ring. Not only does it allow you to get a bearing on where you are positioned and what secrets might be around you, it is your primary source for warping from site to site. If you prefer the more traditional approach, you can open a list of sites to warp to. There are many options available on the map screen. For example, you can warp directly to Round Table Hold with a short sequence of button pushes, or check out what areas are more active for multiplayer. Recently, they patched in NPC icons to help keep track of all those merchants and side quests. One small gripe I have: if you're at Round Table Hold and want to warp up north, it's a little tedious. Maybe not the first time or the second, but if you find yourself making this voyage multiple times in a sitting, you'll start to notice it. I know there's a way to toggle to the area you're attempting to warp to, but this didn't feel any better for me. Overall, the map is very functional, and I feel a vital part of achieving a cohesive open world experience. Speaking of warping, and feel to correct me if I'm wrong here, but where's my homeward bone? The item responsible for whisking you to safety without sacrificing currency seems to, well, have vanished. I'm sure there's all kind of workarounds for this item, but in a game where the developer has embraced ease of use for the player, I wonder why they removed it. Honestly, there hasn't been very many situations I would have used it, but those handful of times, I did miss them. This change does make the branch feel more useful, the one that acts like the Ring of Sacrifice. But I think most people just use save quit to get their runes back. You know, the ones you lose at that hellish unexpected boss encounter. Let's talk a little bit about the quests. As we've come to expect from the Souls experience, side quests remain obscure and almost like a chance encounter, which generally results in the player having to look up how to complete many of these side quests. While I personally don't mind this take on side content, I can see why this has many players scratching their heads and overall unhappy with no journal keeping a score or progress made on any given quest. As far as volume goes, there's a weighty amount of NPCs to interact with and share in adventures. Helping them achieve their goals, or not, is entirely up to the player, for the most part. Many of these quests will span the entire length of the game world, and eventually resolve in you receiving something significant. Having no in-game way of monitoring these quests makes them feel quite organic and personal. From demi-human tailors to bloodthirsty queens, each have a role in making the lands between a living and breathing world, worth unraveling all the mysteries. Let's talk about the music. This might be more polarizing than the difficulty. The comments I've seen about the music have been a mixed bag. Personally, like with all FromSoft games, I find the music to be excellent. Not just from a technical standpoint, but the composition is also very striking. From slow environmental works that are almost reminiscent of Firelink Shrine, to heart-pounding adrenaline-inducing boss themes, there's more variety here than ever before. It seemed to me more drums and unique instruments are at play. At first blush, a lot of these tracks might sound similar, or even familiar with fans. However, the more my ears are exposed to the bombastic movements and sweeping vocals, the more I'm wowed by the sheer complexity and skillful assortment of this soundtrack. Now, you might be shaking your head and thinking, well, obviously, a fan of the Dark Souls series is gonna gush on and on about how great Elden Ring is, blah blah blah. I know. I get that there's a ton of new players picking up Elden Ring and discovering this punishing series for their first time. To them I would say, if you're enjoying the game but find it overly difficult, employ any means necessary to progress. If you continue to play, you'll gain skill, in all likelihood be drawn into this strange assortment of titles Miyazaki has been working on for over a decade. If you don't like it based off graphical fidelity or a design choice that doesn't jive with your preference, I would implore you to give this title a fair shake. While nothing is perfect, Elden Ring is a classic example of why the word exists. As I'm working on this video, I really just want to get back to playing the game. I find this to be a testament to how good Elden Ring really is. Is it Dark Souls 4? I would say yes and no. No, it's not directly a Souls sequel. I believe Miyazaki called Elden Ring an evolution of Dark Souls. Having now played the game and thoroughly explored the lands between, I think it would be hard to argue otherwise. Much like Dark Souls was a new beginning for Demon Souls, Elden Ring is worthy of carrying that mantle forward, a true spiritual successor. That's it for this video. I'm working on a couple of projects including some tips and tricks to enhance your playtime with Elden Ring. As always, have fun and stay safe, my friends.